Happy Christmas from Journey with Us. Today, what I want to share with you is something which is very close to my heart. It's on the topic of forgiveness. At the heart of the gospel is the good news of God's forgiveness and reconciliation. But today, what I want to look at is why is it so hard for us to forgive the other? Actually, the cure for all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, slander, to get rid of it. How do you do that? By being kind, by being tender-hearted, and by forgiving the other even as Christ forgave us, is what Paul talks in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. Actually, that is the definition of what psychologists talk in terms of forgiveness. It is the release of that feeling of vengeance or trying to get back, that release towards a person or a group whom you think has hurt you or harmed you, and releasing yourself to a sense of freedom, getting rid of that bitterness. Forgiveness also is good because once we get rid of that feelings of anger and clamor and you want to just get back, once you get rid of those feelings, you're free. But much more than that, for a follower of Christ, it is also a command that if we do not forgive the other, God the Father in heaven will not forgive us. That is why when Jesus taught his disciples how to pray, it says, "Forgive us our sins, even as we forgive those who have trespassed against us." So it's critical and important that we forgive the other. But forgiveness is not easy. It is actually a divine gift which God's Spirit enables one to do. In our own strength, we will fail. But with God, we can do so much more, and especially in terms of forgiving the other. I want to look at the parable that Jesus spoke of in Matthew chapter 18. He talks of this parable in response to Peter's question of how many times should I forgive the one who has wronged me? And this is what Jesus had to say in response to that. "Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants." So the story is of two servants and a king. And this is the story. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. So the master or the king was settling his accounts with his servants, and a servant is brought to him who owes him 10,000 talents. Now, for a laborer to make a talent, it requires at least 20 years. So basically, what this servant owes the king or the master is he wouldn't be able to even repay in 100,000 year lifetimes. He will not be able to repay. So he owes this king or his master a debt of it's insurmountable. You can never pay that. And eternity would even if you were to live for eternity, you would be still paying that debt. The story, what Jesus is trying to say is that this guy has a debt which he can never pay. So the king decides, and since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment be made. So what is the servant doing? Now the servant, I do not know if he realizes the kind of debt that he is under to this king. I don't know if he even realizes when he opens his mouth and talks to the king. This is what his servant does. He fell on his knees, imploring, that is to the king, "Have patience with me and I'll pay you everything." Have patience with me and I'll pay you everything. Basically, he's saying, give me time and I'll pay. I'll make good the debt that I owe you. I often wonder at his response. Is he a fool or is he arrogant? To think that he could make good the debt that he owed the king, that he could pay it back. Actually, what he should have been asking was, forgive me, grant me mercy. I know I cannot pay this. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 lifetimes will never be able to pay this, O king. Will you forgive me? Will you show me mercy? But no. What the servant says is, give me time and I'll pay you. The arrogance or the foolishness of this person is so evident. Isn't that true in our lives too? But look at the king. He's a generous king. He overlooks the stupidity or the arrogance of this foolish servant. And this is what he says. Out of pity, he shows him mercy. In spite of his arrogance. Verse 27, and out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. That is what the king did. Now, this servant who is forgiven his debt steps out. And even as he is stepping out, he comes across another servant, a fellow servant, who owes him 100 denarii. Now, a denarii is a day's wages for a laborer. So basically, it's 100 days' wages. And this guy owes him 100 wage, and he says, give me back my money. He has been forgiven 10,000 talents. In his joy, if he had known what forgiveness means or what meant to be forgiven, he would have said, it's okay, I forgive your debt. Go ahead, enjoy life. I have been forgiven so much. No. The servant who owed him 100 denarii, he said, if you don't pay me, you're going to jail. And this is what the other servant had to tell this servant who was forgiven so much. He says, have patience with me and I'll pay you. Basically, he says, give me some time and I'll make good your debt. I'll pay your money back. And this is a possible thing. He could do it. It's just 100 days' wages. I will not eat maybe a meal and I will make it and I'll give it to you in 2 years or maybe a year or maybe in 5 years, but I can do it. But you know what he did? This servant refused and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. And there are some other servants who are watching and listening to this whole incident and reports it back to the king or the master. And the master calls this servant whom had been forgiven such a huge debt. You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? That is the heart of the matter. Did you even realize, O wicked servant, the mercy that I showed you? If you would have realized it, you would have so generously offered mercy to your fellow servant. What does this parable tell me? There are a few things that comes home. One is our debt to God can never be paid. And the great story of Christmas is that God became man, lived on this earth with us, finally went to that cross and died where we ought to die, paying that irreparable, means like that debt which we could never pay, God himself pays on that cross by dying in our place, and today living for us at the right hand of God the Father. He paid our debt. He took it upon himself. Our debt with God can never ever be paid. The servant could never ever pay the debt that he owed the king. That is the first lesson. There is another lesson. Is the debt that we owe to one another as humans. This is where I want to focus. Now, what we need to understand is that servant who refused to forgive the other servant who just owed him 100 denarii is not even aware of his own debt, of his own failing, of his own need for mercy and forgiveness. And a person who is not aware of his own need can never offer forgiveness to the other. Because the true offer of forgiveness to our fellow human being forces us to look within ourselves. And when we look within ourselves, we will realize that we are all in the same boat. We all need to be forgiven. We all need mercy. We all need the other to be kind to us. If there is hope for this humanity, is that we offer to one another mercy. Because we all need mercy. The mercy and the kindness of the other. Because we all have hurt the other. We all owe a debt to one another. We are hurt people and we hurt others. So when we offer forgiveness truly, it exposes our own need to be forgiven. There is something else. Forgiveness is also a confession of our own sins. In forgiving our fellow human being, we are saying that we too need to be forgiven. Our sins or our morality is only in terms of degrees. Our sins may be less in degree compared to the other. Compared to the other, I may be a better person. But I am never good in the sense that God is. I sin even as my brother sins. So when I offer forgiveness, it's also a confession. It's also an acknowledgement of my own sin. Forgiveness actually is a force, a power, which forces us to look into ourselves and see our own brokenness, our own fallenness, our own sins, and our own need for forgiveness and mercy. Forgiveness makes us vulnerable. It exposes us for who we really are. When we offer forgiveness, it is not denying the fact the wrong that has been done is not wrong, or the evil that has been done on us, or the pain inflicted is not painful. Those are real. Evil will always be evil. Wrong will always be wrong. The pain that is inflicted will be painful. But we overlook that. But we choose to put that behind us and offer mercy to the other because we acknowledge we have done the same to others. And we too need to be forgiven. The prayer of our Lord who taught us is, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Forgive us as we forgive. Even as we receive the gift of forgiveness from God, we are told to pass it on to our fellow humans. Because that is where hope is. Because that is where we find mercy for our own selves. When I look at this parable, and when I look at my own self, the only place that I find myself is beating my chest and saying, God, will you have mercy on me? Because I need to be forgiven. But the good news of Christmas is this, that God sent His Son into this world so that I could be forgiven, so that you could be forgiven, so that you and I could find mercy. Christmas is a time which talks of God's grace, mercy, forgiveness, and His invitation to come back home. Will you heed the call? Thank you for listening, and God bless.